I already thought the Elden Ring DLC Shadow of the Erdtree would be big, but after reading all the interviews with the game director and losing count on how many times I watched the trailer, it all looks and sounds even bigger than I expected. Like, there will be 8 new weapon types, including an unarmed one, so let's go over everything. And the trailer starts in a familiar location, as we can see the boss arena for Moog and Miquella's cocoon that's still resting there. Miquella will be a hugely important character for this DLC, want to go in depth on why a bit later. But yeah, maybe you already guessed it, but this is actually the point of entry to the Land of Shadow, where the players will enter the DLC area, as confirmed by game director Hidetaka Miyazaki. So if you haven't fought Moog yet, you know what to do if you want to get into the DLC day 1. Fighting him will also be good practice, because Miyazaki also confirmed that this expansion will be on a similar footing to the endgame of Elden Ring. Which honestly is kind of what I was expecting, as I think some of From's most difficult bosses, like Gale and the Orphan of Kos, were also saved for DLC content. But yeah, after interacting with Miquella's egg cocoon thing, we end up in the Land of Shadow. Good to know is that this will be a new map entirely separate from the base game. You are able to seamlessly travel between the two, so after warping to these new lands for the first time, I'm assuming you can freely fast travel between points of grace on this map and the old one. You can also see from these first trailer shots that the Land of Shadow seems pretty big. For one, FromSoft say it's their biggest expansion to date, which makes sense considering the $40 price tag. But what is interesting is that they compare the map size of the DLC to the size of Limgrave, so the entire first region of the map, saying it might be even bigger in scale. And while that doesn't sound massive, the studio has also stated they want this map to be more dense than what we've seen before. And the larger legacy dungeons will of course also return, with many layers and optional paths that will also take a long time to fully explore. Now, the one thing I'm not so stoked about is that Miyazaki also confirmed this new map will contain another poison swamp. I think we get a small glimpse of it in the trailer in this shot, but yeah, I'm still recovering from my Scarlet World PTSD, so I hope this is not the first area we have to conquer. Still though, we'll of course have guides up on the channel when the DLC launches, even for that area, so subscribe to not miss those and leave a like if you enjoyed the video so far. And while the poison swamp is pretty scary, the most terrifying thing in this new environment is the giant twisted tree at the center of it. I'm sure we'll learn more about what it is over the course of the DLC, but it immediately sets a different tone for the Land of Shadow. In the base game, you can be anywhere on the map and see this golden radiant tree bathing the lands around it in light, and it's kind of comforting. Here, however, this twisted dying tree reaches its branches up almost to grab the light from the sky, and it seemingly also casts some sort of veil over the land, which is probably where it got the name from. But whatever it is, it has drawn the attention of some pretty important people to these lands. As I said earlier, one of the main reasons we as Tarnished come to the Land of Shadow is Miquella. Miquella is a very important character in the lore. He's one of the few members of the royal family we haven't met and is spoken of very highly by other characters in the game. He's also an Empyrean, someone with the potential of becoming a god, and I think that's one of the reasons why he came to the Land of Shadow. Another one is that he is tracing the footsteps of his mother Marika, who has also visited these lands for reasons Miquella wants to discover. So for lore fans like myself, it sounds like we're getting a ton of answers to mysteries that still remain from the main game. We also learned that while he did not write any new material for the expansion, the story for Shadow of the Erdtree is based on an unexplored part of the mythology written for Elden Ring by George R.R. Martin. And while I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for any story details, the main reason for exploring the new map is of course to find all the cool new spells, armors and weapons. I'm personally most excited by Miyazaki mentioning there will be 8 entirely new weapon types for the DLC, and I think we already get a glimpse of a couple of them in the trailer. These backhand wielded scimitars also seem to give you access to a sideways quickstep, and dual wielding and rapid firing throwing knives also seems like a pretty powerful addition to your skill set. There's also a weirdly pretty exploding butterfly spell, giant fire bombs and rapid fire crossbows, so a ton of additions regardless of what build you are running, although I'm betting many people will completely change their build to incorporate new weapons. I'm very much looking forward to the return of proper unarmed combat, which is shown off with a powerful looking combo of kicks, so I'll definitely try and make a build around that. It kind of reminds me of the temple art from Sekiro, which also involved unarmed strikes and kicks. And speaking of that game, Shadow of the Erdtree will also have a unique progression mechanic that Miyazaki compared to attack power from Sekiro. So on top of regular level progression, you'll be able to level your combat power specifically for the DLC area, which is done to encourage exploration even more. Because you can't go to a different different region to level up like in the base game, so instead you become stronger by exploring other parts of the DLC region to find these combat upgrades that make future fights easier. On the note of exploration, the Land of Shadow will largely follow the same structure as the map regions in the base game. So you can expect large open areas to explore with interesting landmarks that hide loot and secrets, major and minor dungeons that will likely end in a boss fight, and like I already said, the large-scale legacy dungeons that play out more like a stage from Dark Souls or Bloodborne. What is interesting, however, is that the team has also been experimenting with something in between a legacy dungeon and an open area, which could mean a more open-ended legacy dungeon or, and I think this is more likely, more dungeon-like encounters you can simply stumble into while exploring the open world. And all of these locations will of course be filled with new enemies and bosses to test your skills and build. There's this giant Wickerman-like monster who at first I thought was a roaming boss, but after seeing them next to a patrol in a screenshot, I feel like these are more akin to trolls from the base game. There's also a giant mob beast that can shoot a volley of spikes from its back, which by the way we learned from screenshots is a skill that you can actually learn as well, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. There's also this thing that casually uses part of its own arm as a boomerang, boar riding knights, and of course way more. So as expected from FromSoft, we definitely won't be lacking when it comes to enemy variety in the DLC. But the main course are of course the bosses, of which there will be 10 in total. Some of these will be optional, and Miyazaki also teased there might be some that are on Malenia's level of challenge. I feel like we've only seen 2 so far, one of which being this lion-human centipede mashup. I really don't know what else to call it, sorry, but I did notice the curved horns and the lion-like face, which makes me think this creature is part of the Omen and or Misbegotten. It looks like a formidable opponent as it moves very unpredictably and also has access to lightning powers. But the main attraction for the DLC seems to be a new character called Mesmer the Impaler, who wields a new type of fire magic from the looks of it, and a really cool looking sword spear that I bet we can get as a reward for beating him. And we did learn a bit more about him, with many signs pointing towards him being on the same level of power as the bosses from the main game. The throne he is sitting on in the key art is the same as the ones in Morgoth's boss arena, which were reserved for characters like Radahn, Malenia, and Morgoth himself of course. The clearly visible red hair and the fact that his name starts with an M means there is definitely a possibility he is related to the current Elden Lord Radagon, and most likely to Marika, Mikola, and Malenia as well. And knowing how much George R.R. Martin loves using family dynamics as a device for storytelling, I would not be surprised if Mesmer turns out to be a forgotten member of the royal family who was exiled after some sort of conflict. And I do want to talk about the elephant, or in this case the snake in the room, because I've already seen many people theorizing that Mesmer is actually a younger version of Rykard. That connection is made because of the snake that's part of the character's design and the fact that Rykard literally let himself be eaten by a giant snake. However, Miyazaki has confirmed in an interview with Famitsu that the DLC takes place on the same timeline as the base game, so we won't be traveling to the distant past or future. Still though, I imagine there's a lot of history to Mesmer and why he's in the Land of Shadow, and again, I really need that spear, so I'm definitely looking forward to the fight. When we learn more, we will of course let you know here, so subscribe to stay up to date, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and watch our live reaction to the trailer by clicking on the screen. I will see you in the next one, goodbye.